Late May sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Harbor View Lodge, warming the bridal suite with a soft golden glow. Claire Mitchell stood before the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back. At 33, she wore the gown she had dreamed of since she was a teenager, ivory lace along the bodice, a flowing train trailing behind her, every stitch carefully chosen. She smoothed the fabric nervously, her pulse quickening, not out of doubt but anticipation, yet her gaze kept drifting to the corner of the room. There, on the braided rug, lay Duke. Her 12-year-old German shepherd, usually so alert, so eager to follow her every move, seemed oddly distant this morning. His ears twitched half-heartedly, and his head rested heavily on his paws. "Come here, boy," Claire coaxed gently. She expected the familiar thump of his tail, the shuffle of paws against the floor. Instead, Duke only lifted his eyes toward her, then lowered them again as if even that small effort drained him. Claire's chest tightened. She had known Duke long enough to read him like a book. He wasn't the type to sulk over wedding day bustle. If anything, he usually basked in attention, especially when guests arrived. Today, though, something was different. The door swung open, and her mother, Janet, bustled in with a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. "The makeup artist will be here in 15 minutes, she announced, breathless. "Are you excited, sweetheart?" Claire forced a smile but glanced at the rug. "It's Duke. He hasn't moved all morning. He barely touched his breakfast." Janet followed her gaze and waved a dismissive hand. "He's fine. Dogs pick up on nerves. This whole house has been buzzing since sunrise, and he knows something big is happening." She set the bouquet on the vanity. "Let's not overthink it. We've got a schedule, and Pastor Allen doesn't wait around." But Claire couldn't shake the unease crawling beneath her ribs. She knelt, careful of her gown, and brushed her fingers over Duke's fur. His coat felt warm, too warm, and when she tried to scratch under his chin, he flinched ever so slightly. Her stomach dropped. Memories flashed. The time Duke had growled at her ex-boyfriend days before she caught him cheating. The night he pawed insistently at her father's chest minutes before a heart scare. Duke had always known. He had never been wrong. Now, on the very morning she was set to marry Ryan Cooper, the man she loved, her loyal companion was telling her something again, something she didn't yet understand. The bridal suite soon filled with the sounds of footsteps in the hallway, muted laughter, and the clinking of trays from the catering staff downstairs. Claire tried to focus on the details of the morning, her bouquet, the final touches on her hair, but her eyes kept flicking toward Duke. A sharp bark broke the rhythm of the room. Duke pushed himself upright with effort, his ears pricked toward the French doors that led out to the garden. His body stiffened, tail low, eyes locked on the space beyond the glass panes. Claire startled. "What is it, boy?" Janet sighed, glancing out the window. A delivery van from the bakery pulled into the drive, men unloading boxes. "See, he's barking at the commotion. Too many strangers." He's just protective, but Claire knew the difference. Duke had barked at delivery men before, short bursts, nothing serious. This sound was deeper, more urgent. His hackles rose slightly, his gaze fixed not on the van but on the shaded corner of the garden, near the arbor where the ceremony would take place in just a few hours. She stepped toward the glass, pressing a hand to the cool surface. The garden looked peaceful, rows of white chairs neatly arranged, flower garlands swaying in the breeze, sunlight dappling the stone path. Nothing unusual. Still, her pulse refused to slow. "Claire," Janet warned gently, "you can't spend your wedding morning worrying about every little thing. Duke's old. Old dogs get restless. Focus on you." Claire wanted to believe that. She wanted to laugh it off and return to the mirror, to let the morning unfold as planned. But unease coiled inside her, stubborn and sharp. She crouched beside Duke again, whispering so only he could hear. "You sense something, don't you?" His ears flicked, his breathing heavy. He nudged her hand with his nose, then turned his gaze back toward the garden. A knock interrupted them. Emma, Ryan's sister, peeked in. "Hey, just checking. Makeup team is ready. Ryan's tie still isn't, but that's another story." She grinned, then noticed Duke's rigid posture. "He okay?" Claire hesitated. "I don't know, he's acting different." Emma's smile softened. "He's a smart one. Probably knows today's a big deal. I'll keep an eye out when I head down." When the door closed again, Duke gave a low whine, almost a warning. Claire's throat tightened. She had always trusted him before. He had saved her from heartbreak, from danger, even from losing her father. She couldn't shake the feeling that today, on the most important day of her life, Duke was trying to warn her again. Claire's hand lingered on Duke's fur, and her mind slipped back to the day they met, one of the lowest points of her life. She was 21 then, fresh out of grad school, clutching a marine biology degree she couldn't seem to put to use. The economy had taken a downturn. Interview after interview ended with polite rejection emails. She was broke, exhausted, and more than a little lost. On a rainy Saturday, with nothing to distract her from the silence of her tiny apartment, she drove to the Denver Animal Shelter. The smell of disinfectant and wet fur hit her the moment she walked in. Rows of kennels lined the walls, each holding a dog with eyes that silently begged for attention. Some barked frantically, others curled into themselves, resigned. Claire wandered slowly, unsure what she was looking for. Then she saw him. In the far corner, a scrawny German shepherd pressed himself against the chain-link gate, ribs showing through his dull coat. His tag read simply, Duke 2 years old. Unlike the others, he didn't bark. He just stared, cautious, weary, but with a flicker of hope in his eyes. When Claire crouched down, he lifted his head. Their eyes met and something clicked. She slid her fingers through the gap in the wire. To her surprise, Duke inched forward and rested his nose against her hand, as if testing whether she was real. A volunteer appeared at her side. He's a tough case, picked up stray, real skittish. Doesn't trust easily, but Duke didn't pull away. He leaned harder into her hand, a silent plea. Claire swallowed the lump in her throat. I'll take him, the volunteer blinked. Are you sure he'll need patience? And training, I'm sure, she said, with more conviction than she'd felt about anything in months. That first week wasn't easy. Duke cowered at sudden noises, refused to eat when left alone, and flinched if anyone raised a hand too quickly. But at night, when Claire sat cross-legged on the floor with takeout containers and tears in her eyes from another rejection letter, Duke would edge closer. One evening, he dropped a frayed blue rope toy at her feet, the first sign of trust. She laughed through her tears, tossing it gently. He bounded after it, clumsy but determined, and trotted back with his tail wagging for the first time. From that moment, they were inseparable. Duke became her anchor, her shadow. He pulled her out of the apartment on long walks when she wanted to hide from the world. He nudged her awake when she overslept for interviews. He was, in every way that mattered, her family. And now, years later, dressed in white on her wedding day, Claire still carried the certainty born in that shelter. Duke's instincts were never wrong. Those first months after bringing Duke home stretched into some of the hardest of Claire's life. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter of her cramped one-bedroom apartment. Each day began the same. Coffee in a chipped mug, laptop open on the wobbly table, a spreadsheet of job applications staring back at her. She sent resumes to aquariums, conservation programs, research institutes, anywhere that might use her degree. Most replies never came. The ones that did were polite rejections. By week 6, the silence felt unbearable. On one gray afternoon, Claire slumped on the couch, laptop shut, tears slipping down her cheeks. She buried her face in her hands. The world outside seemed indifferent. Traffic hummed, neighbors laughed in the hallway, while her own life felt stuck. A soft weight pressed against her knees. She peeked through her fingers. Duke had patted over, his rope toy clutched awkwardly in his mouth. He dropped it onto her lap, then looked up with those steady brown eyes as if to say, play with me, don't drown in this. Despite herself, Claire laughed, a shaky, wet sound. You don't give up, do you? She tossed the toy a few feet away. Duke bounded after it with gangly enthusiasm, nearly skidding into the coffee table. When he brought it back, tail wagging furiously, her chest felt a little lighter. That became their ritual. Whenever the silence threatened to swallow her, Duke would nudge her hand or drop the toy. Sometimes he simply climbed onto the couch, curling up beside her, head heavy in her lap. His presence was constant, solid, a reminder that she wasn't alone in her little battles. One night, after yet another fruitless phone interview, Claire sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by takeout containers. Duke shuffled over and set his paw on her thigh, then rested his chin there. She stroked his ears, whispering, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, Duke, but I guess as long as you're here, I'll be okay. He sighed contentedly, as if in answer. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the rejection emails hurt less. Claire adjusted her expectations, taking short-term work tutoring biology students and volunteering at a local wildlife center. Each step forward, however small, Duke was there, waiting at the door, tail thumping, eyes bright with pride. Looking back, Claire would always remember those days not for the loneliness or the financial strain, but for the way Duke filled the silence. He turned despair into companionship, hopeless hours into moments of connection. And on her wedding morning, as she worried over his strange behavior, those memories burned fresh. Duke had carried her through storms before. If he was warning her now, she had every reason to listen. Spring came at last, and with it, a sense of renewal. Claire had taken on part-time work at the local wildlife center, which at least gave her purpose, if not a steady paycheck. On her free days, she often drove Duke to Pine Lake Dog Park, a sprawling stretch of grass and shaded trails where dogs could run free and their humans could breathe for a while. It was there, one breezy Saturday morning, that her life tilted on its axis. Claire had just unclipped Duke's leash when he bolted toward the shoreline, ears flapping like banners. A black and white border collie came racing from the opposite side, and within seconds the two dogs tangled in a spectacular collision, leashes rapping, bodies tumbling, sand flying. Whoa, sorry, a male voice called out, half panicked, half laughing. Claire jogged over, already bracing for Duke's distrust of strangers. To her surprise, Duke didn't snap or growl. He simply wagged, struggling to untangle himself from the collie's leash. The man crouched, hands busy with the knots of nylon. His hair was tousled, his sneakers caked with mud, and his green eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. Scout gets a little too friendly sometimes. Guess he picked a new best friend. Claire laughed, the tension in her shoulders easing. Duke usually keeps to himself. I think Scout might be the exception. Together, they worked the dogs free. Duke shook himself off, showering them both with a spray of damp sand. Claire groaned, brushing grit from her jeans. The man only grinned. Consider it his blessing. I'm Ryan, by the way. Claire. She extended a hand, and he shook it, firm but gentle. What began as small talk about their dogs stretched into an hour-long conversation on the park bench. She learned that Ryan was a veterinarian at a local clinic, passionate about rescue animals and wildlife rehabilitation. He learned that she volunteered at the Wildlife Center and had once dreamed of marine research. They teased each other about their dog's quirks, Scout's obsession with tennis balls, Duke's stubborn refusal to chase anything that wasn't his frayed rope toy. When she finally stood to leave, Ryan hesitated. Hey, would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? For the humans, not the dogs. Claire felt her cheeks warm. Duke gave a short bark, almost as if urging her on. Coffee sounds nice, she said. From that day forward, Duke was there for every step. He sprawled across the couch during their first movie night, supervised the first kiss with a huff of approval, and eventually scooted aside to share his favorite spot when Ryan began spending more time at Claire's apartment. And 2 winters later, on a snowy hike, Ryan knelt in the frost, attaching a small velvet box to Duke's collar. When Claire noticed and opened it, Duke barked, tail wagging furiously, as if proud of his role in the proposal. For Claire, it was never just a love story between her and Ryan. It was a love story the three of them built together. The memory of that snowy proposal faded as Claire blinked back into the present. The bridal suite buzzed with activity now, bridesmaids adjusting dresses, the hairstylist packing up, the photographer darting in and out for candid shots. The air smelled faintly of hairspray and roses, but Claire's focus stayed on Duke. He lay stretched near the French doors, chest rising and falling too quickly. Every so often, his ears flicked toward the garden as if listening to something no one else could hear. Janet, her mother, checked the clock on her phone for the third time. We're running behind, Claire. Guests are already seated. Pastor Allen said he has another ceremony later this afternoon, so we can't delay. Her voice softened but carried an edge. Please don't let nerves ruin this. It's not nerves, Claire said firmly. It's Duke. He's not well. Janet's lips tightened. Sweetheart, he's 12. Old dogs have off days, but you can't walk down the aisle worrying about him. This is your wedding. People flew in from 3 states to be here. The words stung, but Claire couldn't dismiss the unease crawling up her spine. Duke had never acted this way without reason. Emma, Ryan's sister, slipped in quietly, a clipboard in hand. Heads up, the groomsmen are ready. Ryan's pacing like a caged tiger downstairs. She caught sight of Duke and frowned. Still off, Claire nodded. Emma knelt, rubbing Duke's ears. Hey, big guy, you've seen tougher days, haven't you? Duke didn't move, only whined softly. Emma looked up at Claire, her brow creased. I'll let Ryan know, maybe he should come check. Not yet, Claire said quickly. I don't want him worried before. Her words cut off as Duke suddenly heaved himself up, swaying. He padded closer to her, placing himself squarely between Claire and the French doors. His body stiffened, a low growl rumbling from his throat. The room went still. One bridesmaid whispered, "What's out there?" Claire's pulse pounded. She moved toward the glass, but Duke blocked her path, gaze fixed on the garden. His growl deepened. "Claire," Janet warned sharply, "don't get dirt on your gown." The photographer, "Mom, stop," Claire snapped, eyes locked on Duke. He was guarding her from something, she could feel it. For a heartbeat, the bustle of the wedding morning fell silent. Just Claire, her mother, Emma, and the dog who had never once been wrong. And in that stillness, Claire knew whatever was waiting in the garden wasn't just her nerves. Something was coming, and Duke had already sensed it. The growl in Duke's chest deepened, vibrating through the floorboards. Claire's heart hammered as she reached for his collar, but before she could steady him, he lurched forward. "Duke," she cried. In one powerful movement, the old shepherd shoved the French doors open and staggered into the sunlight. Claire hitched up her gown and rushed after him, Emma right on her heels. The garden unfolded before her in a surreal tableau. White chairs lined the aisle, guests shifting in confusion as they turned toward the commotion. The arbor was draped with flowers, ribbons fluttering in the breeze. And just a few feet from the altar, coiled and gleaming in the dappled light, was a rattlesnake, its body thick, its tail buzzing an unmistakable warning. Claire froze, time seemed to splinter. She saw the wedding planner standing nearby, clipboard clutched to her chest, paralyzed with fear. A small flower girl, no more than 8, clutched a basket of petals, her sandals inches from the snake's striking distance. The rattle grew louder. The snake lifted its head, tongue flickering, body tense. "Don't move," someone shouted, but Duke was already moving. With a guttural bark that cut through the stunned silence, he hurled himself between the child and the coiled predator. The snake struck faster than a whip. Its fangs sank deep into Duke's shoulder even as his jaws clamped down around its head. The sound was sickening, final. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The planner screamed. The flower girl burst into tears. Claire's voice broke as she stumbled forward, nearly tripping on her train. Ryan was already sprinting down the aisle, his tie askew, his face pale. He dropped to his knees beside Duke, who had collapsed on the grass, chest heaving. Blood matted his fur where the fangs had pierced. "Stay back," Ryan barked at the guests, his veterinarian instincts taking over. He pressed a hand to Duke's side, assessing. "It's venom. We need to move now." Claire dropped beside them, clutching Duke's head in her lap, tears spilling onto her gown. His eyes, clouded with pain, still flicked toward her, tail giving the faintest wag. Janet arrived, breathless hands pressed to her mouth. "Oh my God, the guests. I don't care about the guests," Claire snapped, her voice fierce. "We're taking him now." Emma didn't hesitate. "My car's out front." "Keys are in it." Ryan slid his arms under Duke's limp body, grunting with the effort. "Claire, ride in back with him. Keep him calm. Don't let him close his eyes." Claire gathered the folds of her dress, cradling Duke against her as Ryan carried him up the aisle. Gasps and whispers followed them, but she barely heard. All she could register was Duke's ragged breathing, the heat of his body, and the smear of blood soaking into her ivory gown. As Ryan pushed through the doors toward the parking lot, Claire pressed her forehead to Duke's. "Hold on, boy, just hold on." The wedding bells never rang. Instead, the sound of tires screeching echoed across Harbor View Lodge as they sped away, not toward the altar, but toward the fight for Duke's life. Ryan laid Duke carefully across the back seat of Emma's SUV, his hands slick with blood and sweat. Claire climbed in beside him, gathering her dress under her knees so she could cradle Duke's head in her lap. The fabric, once pristine, was already ruined, streaked with dirt and red. She didn't care. Emma slid behind the wheel, starting the engine with shaking hands. "Emergency clinics 20 minutes if traffic's clear," she said, voice taut. "Floor it," Ryan ordered, slamming the door shut. "Every minute counts." As the SUV lurched forward, Claire stroked Duke's muzzle, whispering, "Stay with me, boy, just keep your eyes open." His chest rose and fell unevenly, breath rattling. His tail twitched once, weak but deliberate, as though trying to reassure her. Janet sat in the passenger seat, still in shock. "Claire, think about what you're doing. Guests are sitting there, waiting." "Pastor Allen, Mom," Claire snapped, her voice raw. "I don't care about the guests. I don't care about the pastor. Duke saved that little girl's life. He saved all of us. If we don't get him help now, he'll die." Janet's lips trembled, but she said nothing more. She turned toward the windshield, clutching the bouquet still in her lap until petals scattered across the floor. Ryan leaned over the seat, steadying Duke's body as Emma swerved onto the main road. "He's going into shock. Keep his head elevated. Don't let him drift." Claire nodded frantically, her hands trembling as she adjusted the blanket under him. Tears blurred her vision. "You've always been my rock," she whispered, her forehead pressed to Duke's. "Don't leave me now." Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, though Claire couldn't tell if they were real or only in her ears. The SUV barreled past honking cars, the world outside a blur of asphalt and flashing lights. Her phone buzzed endlessly in her purse, texts from bridesmaids, from relatives, from guests demanding answers. She ignored them all. Nothing mattered except the faint thump of Duke's heart against her palm. Emma glanced in the rearview mirror, her knuckles white on the wheel. "Almost there, 5 more minutes." Ryan's voice was steady but grim. "Snake venom spreads fast. Anti-venom is tricky. We'll need luck and Duke's strength." Claire swallowed hard, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. She looked down at the dog who had carried her through heartbreak, through loneliness, through every storm. Even now, half-conscious, Duke's eyes flicked up to meet hers, full of the same trust he'd given her in that shelter years ago. "Hold on, boy," she whispered again. "We're not done." Not today. The SUV screeched into the parking lot of the emergency animal hospital. Ryan was out the door before the wheels stopped turning, yanking it open and lifting Duke into his arms. Claire followed, skirts tearing against the pavement as she ran beside them. The glass doors slid open with a rush of cool air. A team of vet techs rushed forward with a stretcher. "Rattlesnake bite," Ryan barked. "Shoulder, he's 12. We need anti-venom now." As Duke was wheeled away, Claire stumbled after them, her hands empty, her heart pounding. She had never felt so helpless or so determined. The automatic doors hissed shut behind them, sealing the chaos of the parking lot outside. Inside, the emergency animal hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee left too long on a burner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their cold glow casting sharp shadows on the tiled floor. Vet techs wheeled Duke down the hallway, IV lines and monitors clattering. Claire reached out instinctively, but a nurse gently held her back. "We'll take care of him, please wait here." And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the swinging doors of the treatment ward. Claire stood frozen, her hands stained with Duke's blood, her wedding dress torn and ruined. Ryan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, guiding her toward a row of plastic chairs in the waiting area. Emma sat across from them, her clipboard abandoned on the floor, eyes wide with worry. Minutes stretched into hours. Claire couldn't tell if it was 30 minutes or 3. Every tick of the clock felt heavier than the last. Her phone buzzed constantly, but she left it face down on the table. Messages from bridesmaids, relatives, maybe even Pastor Allen, none of it mattered. Janet sat stiffly in the corner, clutching the shredded bouquet. She hadn't spoken since the car ride, but her eyes were red, her face pale. At last she whispered, "I didn't realize how much he means to you, to all of us." Claire turned toward her, tears brimming. "He's family, Mom. He's been there for me when no one else was. When I was lost, when Dad was sick, Duke always knew. He's not just a dog." Janet's lips trembled, and for once she didn't argue. She only reached across the space between them, squeezing Claire's hand. Finally, the doors opened. A woman in scrubs stepped out, Dr. Morales, her expression grave but not without hope. She pulled off her gloves and addressed them quietly. "We've administered antivenom. His vitals are unstable, but he's holding on. The next 12 hours will be critical. He's older, which makes it harder, but he's fighting." Claire shot to her feet. "Can I see him?" Dr. Morales hesitated, then nodded. "For a few minutes. He needs calm, quiet." No crowds. Ryan placed a steadying hand on Claire's back as they followed the doctor down the hall. Monitors beeped softly behind closed doors, a steady rhythm of life and fragility. When they entered Duke's room, Claire's breath caught. He lay on a padded table, hooked up to IV lines, a bandage wrapped around his shoulder. His fur looked dull under the harsh lights, but his eyes flicked open as she approached. His tail gave the faintest thump against the blanket. Claire knelt beside him, careful of the wires. She stroked his muzzle, whispering, "You're so brave. You saved us all today." Ryan stood close, his hand resting on her shoulder, voice hushed. "He wanted to make sure you walked into a safe future." Duke blinked slowly, his gaze steady as if agreeing. Claire pressed her forehead to his, feeling the steady warmth beneath the machines. For the first time since morning, her tears weren't just of fear. They carried gratitude, because no matter what happened, Duke had already given her everything. Claire kept her hand on Duke's fur, unwilling to let go. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor filled the small treatment room, each sound a fragile reminder that he was still with them. Ryan stood nearby, sleeves rolled up, his face lined with exhaustion but steady with resolve. "Claire," he said softly, "I know this isn't the wedding we imagined, but I don't care about the flowers or the music or the timeline. I care about you and about him." He glanced at Duke, whose eyes flickered open at the sound of his voice. "I think we should get married here today with Duke by our side." Claire blinked, startled. "Here, in the hospital?" Ryan nodded. "He's been with us every step of the way. I don't want to say my vows without him." Her throat tightened. The image of the decorated arbor at Harbor View flashed through her mind, but it dissolved quickly, replaced by the sight of Duke lying brave and broken yet still present. She nodded, tears spilling freely. "Yes, here, that's all that matters." Emma rushed out to call Pastor Allen. To their surprise, he agreed without hesitation. "Wherever the bride and groom are," he said when he arrived, slightly out of breath, "that's where the wedding belongs." Dr. Morales gave them privacy, though she lingered at the doorway, clearly moved. The staff dimmed the lights a little, softening the sterile glare. Emma handed Claire her bouquet, petals bent, stems bruised from Janet's grip but still fragrant. Claire stood beside Ryan, her ruined gown brushing the tile floor, her hand never leaving Duke's head. Emma and Janet acted as witnesses, their faces streaked with tears. The hum of machines became their music, the antiseptic air their cathedral. Pastor Allen opened his book, voice low but strong. "Marriage is not about the place or the grandeur. It is about the promise. Today in this room, love is present. That is all we need." Claire's voice shook as she repeated her vows. "I, Claire, take you, Ryan, to be my husband. You've shown me patience, compassion, and unwavering strength. You've loved Duke as much as I do, and that tells me everything I need to know about the man I'm marrying." Ryan's eyes glistened. He took her hand, speaking with a catch in his throat. "I, Ryan, take you, Claire, to be my wife. Your kindness, your resilience, and the way you fight for those you love inspire me every day. You make me better. You make me whole." As Pastor Allen pronounced them husband and wife, a soft sound broke the hush. Duke, weak but determined, lifted his head slightly and let out a faint bark. The room erupted in laughter through tears. Even Janet smiled, pressing a hand to her chest. Claire knelt immediately, kissing Duke's muzzle. "You did it, boy. You stayed for us." Ryan leaned down, wrapping both of them in his arms. In that moment, there were no chairs, no guests, no perfect photographs. There was only love, messy, raw, unplanned, but stronger than anything Claire had ever imagined. When Pastor Allen quietly excused himself, leaving them to their moment, the room felt like holy ground. A wedding not marked by music or grandeur, but by loyalty, sacrifice, and the presence of a faithful friend who had given everything for them. Night settled heavily over the emergency clinic. The staff dimmed the hallway lights and the usual chatter faded, leaving only the steady beeps of monitors and the faint hum of machinery. Claire and Ryan never left Duke's side. Still in their wedding clothes, they took turns stroking his fur, whispering to him, reminding him he wasn't alone. Duke's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. His bandaged shoulder twitched occasionally, the venom working its cruel way through his bloodstream. Dr. Morales checked in every hour, her face kind but increasingly solemn. "He's fighting," she said quietly, "but his age makes it harder." Claire sat on the edge of the cot, holding Duke's paw in both of hers. Her thumb traced the worn pads, remembering all the trails they had walked together, all the nights he had nudged her awake from nightmares. "You've always carried me, boy," she whispered. "Let me carry you now." Ryan stood close, resting a blanket over Claire's shoulders. His eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "He knows he's loved, that's what matters." Around midnight, Duke stirred. His eyes opened briefly, cloudy but focused on Claire. He shifted his head weakly until it rested against her lap. His tail tapped once, a whisper of the wag that had always greeted her at the door. Claire bent low, pressing her forehead to his. "I love you. You've been the best part of my life." Ryan leaned in, his hand covering both of theirs. "You've given us everything, Duke. You can rest if you need to." The words caught in Claire's chest, but she knew they were true. As dawn painted the edges of the sky in pale gray, Duke's breathing grew shallower. The monitor beeped erratically, then slowed. Claire clutched his paw tighter, tears streaming unchecked. Dr. Morales entered silently, checking the IV lines, then glanced at them with eyes full of compassion. She didn't need to say anything. Claire felt it, the soft exhale, the stillness that followed. Duke's chest no longer rose. The monitor flatlined in a long, steady tone. "No," her voice cracked, breaking into sobs. She pressed her face into his fur, inhaling his familiar scent one last time. Ryan wrapped his arms around her, his own tears spilling. Together they held him, unwilling to let go even as the truth settled like a weight in their bones. After a long while, Claire lifted her head, her cheeks streaked with grief but her voice a whisper of resolve. "He gave us the greatest gift." Ryan frowned gently. "What do you mean?" Claire brushed Duke's ear back with trembling fingers. "He reminded us what love really is. Not about perfect weddings or plans that never go wrong. It's about being there for each other, protecting each other, choosing each other. Just like he always chose us." Janet and Emma stood at the doorway, tears streaming silently. For the first time, Janet stepped forward, laying her hand on Claire's shoulder. "He was family," she whispered. "And he left this world knowing that." Claire nodded, her voice too broken to speak further. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the hospital windows, Duke lay peaceful at last, surrounded by the people he loved most. His final gift was not just his bravery, it was the lesson he left behind. Love, in its purest form, asks for nothing but presence and devotion. The days that followed were a blur of grief and silence. The wedding guests returned home, their messages of sympathy pouring in, while Claire and Ryan moved through the motions like shadows. The photographs from the hospital wedding sat untouched on her phone. She couldn't bear to look yet. But through the sorrow, something else stirred. Duke's absence left a space so large it demanded to be filled, not with despair but with purpose. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Ryan broke the silence. "We saved up for Hawaii," he said quietly. "But what if we used that money for something else? Something that honors him?" Claire turned toward him, her eyes swollen from days of tears. "Like what?" "A foundation, for senior dogs, for the ones people overlook because they're too old or too sick. Just like Duke once was." The idea took root instantly, growing in Claire's chest like a spark in the dark. "We could call it Duke's second chance." And so they did. Instead of beaches and cocktails, their honeymoon became paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with local shelters. They poured their savings into covering medical expenses for older rescues, dogs whose lives might otherwise end in silence behind chain-link fences. Claire designed the logo herself, a simple sketch of Duke's favorite rope toy, its frayed ends shaped into a heart. The first dog they sponsored was Bella, a 9-year-old retriever surrendered after her elderly owner passed away. When Claire met her, Bella cowered in the back of the kennel, eyes dull. But weeks later, after surgery and foster care, she wagged her tail for the first time in months. Watching her run across the grass, Claire felt Duke's spirit near, nudging her forward. Word of the foundation spread. Donations trickled in, then poured, as news outlets picked up the story of the dog who saved a wedding party and the couple who turned heartbreak into hope. Letters arrived from across the country, stories of loyal companions, of grief, of healing. Each one reminded Claire that she wasn't alone in her loss and that Duke's story belonged to many now. A year later, on a bright spring afternoon, Pine Lake Dog Park filled with laughter and barks. Families gathered with their adopted senior dogs, tails wagging, muzzles gray but eyes shining. The event was part reunion, part celebration, part memorial. Claire stood with Ryan near the water's edge, watching Bella chase Scout with surprising speed. Emma handed out foundation pamphlets. Janet mingled with other dog owners, her smile softer than it had been in years. When the sun dipped low, Ryan surprised Claire with a small velvet box. Inside was a silver necklace, the pendant a delicate paw print taken from Duke's impression years earlier. On the back, engraved in simple letters, "Love leads on." Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling again. She fastened the necklace around her neck, the cool silver warming quickly against her skin. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ryan kissed her temple. So was he. As the crowd gathered for a group photo, dozens of senior dogs pressed close to their families. Claire looked around and felt her chest swell. This was the wedding gift Duke had left them. Not flowers or photographs, but a living legacy of second chances. She lifted her face to the breeze, the sound of barking and laughter carrying across the lake. "Thank you, boy," she whispered. In that moment she knew. Duke hadn't just saved them on their wedding day. He had taught them what it meant to love without condition, to fight for what matters, and to find beauty in life's most unexpected turns. His paw prints might fade from the earth, but they would never fade from their hearts. As we close this story, remember that Duke's legacy wasn't just about bravery, it was about love that never gives up. His journey reminds us that sometimes the most powerful moments happen in the most unexpected places, and that loyalty and compassion can change lives. If Duke's story touched your heart, we invite you to keep his spirit alive by sharing this video with others who believe in second chances. Your support helps these stories reach more people who might need hope today. And if you want to hear more heartfelt stories about courage, love, and the bond we share with our animals, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Together, we can keep Duke's legacy alive and remind the world that love always leads the way.